with that, Alan Knitowski, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Excellent. Won the Polish war for today.
Yes.
And then
How do you pronounce your last name?
Knitowski, just like knitting, so don't pronounce the K. Or hey you, that works.
he is the CEO of Phunware, which does mobile as a service, which is something that, honestly, I'd not heard of before Phunware, so interested to hear more about that. This is not his first rodeo. He's, as he's already mentioned tonight, a multiply successful entrepreneur and also does blogging and entrepreneur mentorship with the University of Miami, which is your alma mater. Right? That would have been awful if I'd said Florida State or something like
Well, we got the Miami-Florida State game this week, so it'll be interesting to see.
So with that, tell me when to push forward.
Sure, just go ahead and forward. And very informal, so whatever you guys want to know about, stop me wherever. I've had the good benefit of getting to talk to folks doing entrepreneurship in a lot of places. So I've got to go to UC Irvine and Miami, and I do it with Baylor every now and then. And I got to go up to the Inc. 500 Awards recently. We were number 40 in the country on the Inc. 500 list, which was fun. And we were, I think, the 4th fastest growing software company in the country. So for the first time, went up, my wife went with me, and we stayed at a non-Priceline hotel that we bid for, and stayed in a nice place. And it was really fun. I went in a day early because I'm an ex-Army Ranger. And as a result of that, I went a day early because they had all these wonderful entrepreneurs that were military veterans, active duty military, both for-profit, not-for-profit, and their spouses and families, which was just amazing. So they were going around asking people why they were there and all this stuff. And I just said, I'm just here to help for a day. So anyone that needs help, I'm happy to do it. And got to meet with a bunch of companies. About half were for-profit, half were not-for-profit. It's always interesting to talk about business models for not-for-profit. But that worked out a little bit. You go to the next one. We're going to hit a bunch of different categories of things. You know, I've got a bunch of stuff up here. But a little bit about me. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. And if I was sort of middle, lower class, I would probably be lying. So I grew up, my father was a mason, so I learned how to do a lot of hard manual labor. And my mom worked in a junior high library. And so the wonderful part of our beautiful country is as long as you don't go through life as a victim and you get off your ass and work, anybody can do anything. And so I always kind of sit back when they have the politics and the discussions of entitlement and all this stuff. It really just offends me because there's always these perceptions of, you know, not everyone has the same background of where you all get to come from. And I'm like, look, my parents didn't go to college. One was a mason. We were about as hardworking, blue collar as humanly possible. But they did a great job of teaching, work your butt off, have a passion for what you do. And if you work hard, you can do anything you want. If you don't like what you do, figure out something new and go do that. And so that was great. So I had 2 older brothers, and I wanted to get away from Tucson, Arizona. So part of the way when you think of how do I get away, doing well in school was a way to do that. So I was fortunate that I finished first in my high school class. So I got an appointment to West Point, almost went there. Instead, I got a postcard from the University of Miami on the Air Force side. It said, please come to Miami and we'll pay your room and board to go along with your ROTC scholarship. So I knew nothing about Miami. I just knew that it was warm weather and a hell of a long way from my mom and dad, which is a big, important thing to get as far away as I could. You know, I saw like going up to either Maine, Alaska, and I was like, that's cold. I'm not going to survive there. So I flew down by myself over spring break of my senior year to go check out the University of Miami. We couldn't really afford to do anything other than just have me have an airline ticket. So I flew down and someone from the ROTC program met with me and walked me around. And I realized it was a very small private school. Miami's only like 8,000 undergraduates. I know everyone here, 50,000 people at Texas. Miami's very, very small, private, not public. And they had the most unique program ever. So everyone around the country, like me, went there because you could use your ROTC scholarship. What that meant is in 1987 when I showed up, I went to my very first college party with a toga instead of like going to West Point, which I have friends that, our COO at Phunware, he went the West Point route, which meant he didn't get to date or have fun. And I got to wear togas at Suntan U, so that was good. And my very first party ever when I showed up was walked down and 2 Live Crew was singing live. Anybody know 2 Live Crew? It was and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like this little kid from Arizona. Women are screaming 2 Live Crew songs, and it was just pretty unbelievable. So I was there from the glory years of Hurricane football from 87 to 91. Those of you who watch ESPN would have saw the 30 for 30 that Billy Corbin did. And that was exactly when I was there. It was very weird because unlike this, it put a U on your chest and said, "You rapist," and you're like a little white kid from Arizona you're realizing they're talking to you because you went to the U and now you can't spell thug without the U apparently. So I've lived through everything about, you sort of get the us versus the world mentality, which is a great mentality for being an entrepreneur. Because when I was 18, I was 5'2" and weighed about 110 pounds. So it's always interesting when you hit puberty when you're 19, things that other people don't tell you. When you grow that late, you really, I went to my West Point interviews. It was, you can't be in the military, you couldn't hold the pack, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's a certain point in life when everybody keeps telling you what you can't do, you just get pissed, right? And being with VCs and what you're going to go through as you're funding your company, to this day, for all this success and all the things we've done, you're going to find out how Phunware actually has never had venture capital, private equity, or corporate strategic investment. Because everybody that sits in the VC crowd is smarter than even us, right? We've sold 3 companies. I've invested in 3 that have gone public, Bizarre Voice, Ring Central, which just went public about a month ago. I've known Vlad and Vlad since it was like 5 guys and a dog in Silicon Valley. And the other one was Vonage. I actually put the first $100,000 into Vonage when it was called MinX Holdings. And so what's interesting is you would think that when you go through, like, what's the reason you go to all these places and try to build a pedigree is because they're going to analyze you as a management team. And they want to rip you to shreds about what you don't know and you're too young. First meeting I ever had in Silicon Valley after I got out of the military when I started my first company, sat across from someone, looked me in the eye and basically said, "Son," again, because everyone has to be patronizing, "you're naive if you think you know the first damn thing about running a company. You kidding yourself? You think you're going to be a CEO and you're just sitting there like, your eyes get big." And there's no good response to that, right, when you get insulted. So you try to be polite, candid, open, and direct. So, I learned how to people give me shit all the time. So, and I'll apologize in advance for cussing, as Paul will correct me. He keeps counting, and I have to buy beers for all these. But growing up, being 5'3", and being told everything I couldn't do in my whole life, got to a point where it just pisses me off, and it does to this day. If you want to stand here, anyone from Austin Ventures, I would rail on you if you're in here from Austin Ventures right to your face. I have zero respect for the whole organization, and I would tell you all the things that I despise about most venture capitalists, and how Vinod Khosla was dead right when he said 90% of all VCs add no value, and in fact 70 to 80% add negative value. It's the classic swoop and poop, we know better. And ironically, that's funny when you meet with a lot of people that have never run anything before, wanting to tell you about what works and what doesn't. So you have to be polite in the way you engage. But one of the things that I said, in the most polite way I could, the first time that someone challenged that, is I said, if I was in your shoes, I would say the same thing. Because statistically, if there are 5,000 of us that come in to talk to you, you could say that 4,999 times, and you'll be dead right. Because as we all know, 95%, probably, give or take, of all companies will fail in the first 12 months. And I said, so I get that. Statistically, you can say that to people like me every day of the week, and most of the time you're going to be right. But I said, you have to ask yourself one important question that you're not asking. Am I the one? How do you know if I'm the one? What are you going to tell me to convince me that I'm wrong, you're right, and the only thing we're going to get to do is have hindsight? So I said, as much as I'd love your investment, we're going to do this whether you help us or not. In fact, I expect it to be really hard, and I expect to not have help. So you can either back us because we like to stand on the podium and win, and the only reason we get out of bed in the morning is to win, and you can believe that or you can't. If you don't, it's going to be fun because I'm going to tell you I told you so. It's just a matter of I can't give you the exact timing of when I'm going to say I told you so. And so you don't have to necessarily be combative, but you shouldn't ever have the delusion that the folks you're talking to in a span of 30 minutes to an hour somehow have solved nuclear physics and solved that teleportation problem we were talking about. Because at the end of the day, people will overwhelm the outcome of everything. You could fund the same exact company 10 times, 9 will fail, and the one that doesn't will be because of the people. So the only thing you should care about in your organization is finding the best people on earth, and you should make yourself redundant and irrelevant. So I tried to find somebody that if I got hit by a bus, they could step in, run Phunware. The entity is more important than I am. It's not my baby. It never is. Once you take $1 of someone else's money, they're giving you 1 because they want 10 back. Ideally, they want 100 back, but they'll settle for 10. So you have to understand the game of startups, and I don't like to say a game because it's very serious, right? When we sold our very first company and we realized that me and the co-founder had our houses as collateral for all the Dell CapEx equipment that we had in Silicon Valley, it hones your attention really well to realize that I lose my house if this doesn't work. So the biggest difference I'll talk about on some of these, of what I saw in the Valley, what I see here, because after I got in the military, I spent 5 years in Silicon Valley. I spent 7 in Newport Beach, and I've only been in Austin for about the last 5. So the first 6 months when I got here, we hadn't done Phunware yet. We met ATI, we met Capital Factory, or Bootstrap Austin, I guess, before Capital Factory. We met CTAN, we met all the different groups, Austin Technology Council, and I actually didn't think I was going to start a company. I thought I would join CTAN, join some boards, invest some money, do all that, and then the serial entrepreneur bug got the better of me. As my kids like to say, that means Daddy makes Lucky Charms, and I'm like, no. But in any event, I went to Miami on that scholarship with the military. I got an educational delay. I was commissioned as a pilot. Went to Georgia Tech to learn all the stuff that I didn't learn at Miami, but I was probably supposed to while I was there. And had a lot of fun. But then I had the needs of the Army. They pulled my pilot slot, put me in the Corps of Engineers, sent me to Ranger School, and deployed me to the 94 nuclear inspections of North Korea. So nothing will fine-tune the rest of your life better than getting shot at, I will tell you. You know, the corporate philosophy we have is very simple, right? I get to eat, I get to sleep, I get to see my family if I'm not on the road today, I even get to have a beer, and nobody's shooting at me. So this really isn't so bad. And keeping context is important because every one of you are supposed to fail. Everything you're doing is not supposed to work. So you can either believe that and let people keep convincing, or you can fight like hell. And that's where you also have to get very good with managing your people, because it's okay if people want to have passionate positions. Your job, if you're running the company, is to get to a point where you say, heard all the passionate opinions, realize we're not going to have group consensus, but the good news is I get to shoulder the fact that I could care less about having group consensus. So now, thank you for the input. Here's what we're going to do. Let's violently execute against that. And if we're wrong, I can shoulder that burden because that's what I'm here for. Now, hopefully, my gut's right 80% of the time, and the other 20% of the time will bury that so no one knows. No. But in any event, it was a good experience to have gone off, served in the military, gone to the Valley, worked with Northern Telecom. Northern Telecom is now bankrupt, as you know. I like to smile and take some credit for that. My first company was started specifically under the adage that hell hath no fury like a scorned woman. You know, I said, no, hell hath no fury like a scorned serial entrepreneur with access to a crap load of capital. And we actually open sourced every bit of Nortel's software in the heart of the network to destroy every bit of profit they made. Why would I do such a thing? One, it was very friendly to Cisco, who was trying to hurt the incumbent. And it made them like us because we helped pull through massive gear of switches and routers and hubs and phones. And I had the added benefit to say, you shouldn't have tried to pull your funding of my MBA because we had an agreement and contract and you decided not to honor it. And I'm a really loyal person until you fail to honor a very basic thing. And then I decided to set up my very first company with a business model to annihilate every bit of profit Nortel made in enterprise switching by giving away everything they did for free and build a business model out of it. So sometimes, you know, our CTO is my Vietnamese twin, Luan Dang. He's trying to get him to name one of his kids Gosh, because we got a little Gosh Dang. But he's my twin, and I mean that. We're both 44. We've both been married for 18 years. We both have 4 children. We both have 3 daughters, followed by a son. And they're 8765432 in alternate year sequence. Him, me, all the way through. So we've done everything together. I ran global product management at Nortel. He ran global development. And then it just seemed like a natural thing in the Valley. You were supposed to start companies because everyone else was doing it. You didn't know what the hell that meant. But that was important. So tonight what I wanted to do is go through everything from things I've learned to things you have to be serious about to things that are being assessed on you without you knowing about it, whether it's fair or unfair. So you can maximize the ability to get the things you want without fighting against currents that you can either try to fight and prove you're right, certain things you don't want to try to prove you're right or wrong on, and I'll try to show some of those with you. Next one's fun. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So how many of you even know of Phunware? I know a few of you do, but not a lot. Okay, handful. That's good. So Phunware was set up under the simple premise that there's hardware, software, firmware, and we wanted there to be Phunware. So the name comes from applications that exhibit game-like mechanics and behavior. And the idea, unlike our CFO who once said we put the FU back in Phunware, so that's probably not a good one, we actually went through and we said the fun side of Phunware was all out of the gaming industry. Massive multiplayer games, AAA console games, UI, UX, look and feel, sort of really engaging, addictive, playful, entertaining experiences. And we combined it with the Ware side of Phunware, which we were all ex-Cisco, Nortel, Alcatel. So we specialized in communication infrastructure, networking, telephony, and I called it the other iOS, the Internet Operating System that's tied to all the Cisco gear. And so when we first started, we had to put these two groups together who had no idea how to communicate with each other. Because even the terms of producer versus program manager was like a concept that was difficult to grasp. And since we've gone along, we've had to overlay that with agency speak so you can understand what WPP or Omnicom and those kind of folks say. So the interesting part is that Phunware, if you said, like if communications had a revolution from circuit to packet switching back when voice over IP came along, mobile is very similar. It's this revolution where 5 billion feature phones are all going away, and some version of smartphone will replace it. So when you said, what is Phunware really designed to do? Well, if that's a revolution, we were trying to arm humanity to engage, manage, and monetize every connected device on the planet. That's our goal as a company. And so that's a pretty big concept. But every big concept is where all the money is. Because why? Most people don't want to think about something like, if I said, I'm going to touch every connected device on the planet, you'd probably naturally look at me and say, ha ha, or yeah, okay. And so this year, though, we're going to do about 1 trillion transactions in 175 countries and 10 languages. And we started with smartphones and tablets when they came along. But now we built an infrastructure that can support not just mobile as a service, which we pioneered to talk about the mobile cloud, but multi-screen as a service, so wearable computing, television, in-car infotainment, digital signage. So we wanted to focus on where the puck is at, where the puck is going. We wanted to have something that was a big agnostic thing, and that was really important for us. And now we are reaching staggering amounts of people on a worldwide basis, but until we touch them all, we will not be done. So, next slide. When we thought about what was going on in the world, this was really important and foundational to what we were trying to do. The 3 most disruptive forces of all enterprise software, the way it's built, managed, stored, evolved, roadmapped, purchased, supported, maintained, you name it, was radically changing. So that was about the cloud. It was about mobile, which we always thought mobile first, and we always thought this was the first screen, not the second, not the third, not the fourth, but the first, which might seem obvious now, but I tell you in fourth quarter of 2008, when we started in February of 2009, no one believed that. In fact, you could count the number of apps on one hand that were from enterprise brands. So we wanted to sit at the intersection. We realized at the intersection of that, no one knew what the hell that was. So we pioneered the idea of the mobile cloud. And if you go to the next slide, the idea of the analogy I'll describe was effectively like you think of Salesforce as a sales or marketing cloud, the way you would think of Facebook as a business-to-consumer social cloud, or here locally, Bazaar Voice would be the business-to-business social cloud. We wanted to be the mobile cloud. When we looked to say, who does that? We couldn't find it. So we said, that's what we're going to be globally. Because back when we did migration from circuit to packet, there was Nortel, Ericsson, Lucent, Alcatel, Siemens. They called them the Nellas. And then you had all the guys like Bay Networks, 3Com, and Cisco that were the emerging entrants. And this time, though, we had no idea who was doing what because they didn't exist. So we said, we're going to go after a fully integrated mobile services platform. We're going to have 12 modules of infrastructure to solve operational headaches or monetization headaches. And we're going to design everything people needed to be successful on mobile by focusing not on a feature war with each point solution, but the inter-module use cases to get a full closed loop, one throat to choke, one single login, everything meant for native. All the SDKs were meant to play nicely together, and that was the goal of what we wanted to do, which was important because the Valley bet big on one thing. They bet that mobile would go the way of the internet. and everything would be HTML. And therefore, HTML5 came along. And what did it do? It failed miserable. Didn't work. It was a silver bullet or a panacea that failed. And then people tried to make these write once, run anywhere platforms to make mobile applications, which ensured you were average everywhere and exceptional nowhere. And so what we found is that we learned very early that nothing worked, all the shortcuts didn't work. The only thing that looked stupid was a big brand. And we only wanted 5,000 customers, just the Fortune 5,000. We didn't really care about the starving app developer audiences that couldn't afford to pay, because my attitude to you guys, if someone doesn't pay for your product or service, it's not useful. So find people that will pay for your product or service, and life will be quite good. The reason that we found that the venture capital community, despite selling a business to Cisco and another one to Level 3 and another one to Internet Security System, and doing all these things over and over and over again, you would think serial success would make that easier. In fact, no, it became dangerous because what we were fundamentally doing is we were actually about to blow up what Silicon Valley was investing enormous pools of money. Because in every one of these things, like alerts and notifications, there's a company called Urban Airship, Loyalty and Rewards, Badgeville, Location Tools. Locally, that was Gowalla. Then you saw Foursquare. Analytics and Business Intelligence, Flurry, which followed the Nielsen and the ComScore and Omniture. And you can go through every one of these, and I can show you all the point solutions. And if I said, find one that does it all, you couldn't even find one globally. There is none. And so we've been building that for 4.5 years to solve the headaches that people actually have. Because these brands wanted to build and reach these users, but guess what? What do VCs and private equity funds love? They want infrastructure. Oh, no worries. All this infrastructure they want, why? It's highly scalable, it's picks and shovels, it's high margin. But the dirty secret of mobile is if you do not know how to do this really well for iOS and Android and other applications on smartphones and tablets, what do you guys do as users? Delete. You're like, this is garbage, delete. And suddenly they were realizing, like, that's my identity on mobile for NBC Sports Network. I don't want you to hit delete. And when you have $1 billion of advertising to support NBC Sports Network for the Summer Olympic Games, and then you use like Adobe Air, and Adobe's a good partner, but they've sunsetted the Air platform because it didn't work. They got a 1-star rated app for the Summer Olympic Games in London. And as a result, when you risk $1 billion and embarrass IBM, American Express, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's, suddenly people realize that hurts a lot. So what we really focus on is client-server content. You can go to the next slide. Of everything that people need to do on these very complicated systems. And this idea that I was describing is to say, nobody wants 12 partners for procurement. Nobody wants 12 sets of technology with 12 sets of architecture and 12 people pointing at each other when nothing works. They just want time to market, time to money, peace of mind. They want to know that you're not going to embarrass their valued brand anywhere at any time that someone wants to engage with it. And that's all about sort of Phunware. Next slide. So we can even go past that one. This is just brand bingo. So, you know, I feel bad. Does anyone play Candy Crush Saga? No?
Well,
You know why? No, 70% are women, so I'd expect the female hands to go. But you guys are all unusual. You're entrepreneurs, so you're working. So King.com is about to do a $5 billion IPO. They make about $600,000 to $800,000 profit per day off of Candy Crush Saga, Pet Rescue Saga, and all these wonderfully addictive games. And so with people like this, we actually help them build their mobile audience. So they might pay us $3 or $4 an install, just like you would think of a Facebook wall feed. And then what we do is actually help them build the audience because they know everyone that actually downloads that app is going to spend more than $10 with them because they're like little crack addicts and they can't get enough of it. And they'll spam their friends to get free lives, and they'll all this insane stuff. What level of the
That's why I get all the invites for that.
That's why you get the invites, because you get free lives if you can get someone like you to do it, and then it virally spreads. So they're over in London, but we've got an amazing array of customers in every vertical now, and this one is something I'm extremely proud of because this is really hard to have like a handful of these, yet alone all of them. And let's go to the next one. So I'm going to tell you stuff really openly. Like, you know, the other kind of delusion that I think is quite funny is everybody comes in and wants to talk to you guys about things, and no one will tell you like how you make money. Or I'm going to show you like exactly our scorecard. What do we raise money at? What was the valuation? What's the price per share? What we're doing right now that's actually not even closed yet, because who cares? What I'm going to encourage you to do something what we do every 3 weeks. I send out a Phunware flash report with a PH. And I'm going to encourage you, for everyone you take money from, you better send out stuff to them every 2 to 3 weeks as an update. Because what you're not realizing is when you take someone's money and you only go back to them when you need more money, do you think you have a good relationship with them that they're going to say, oh, haven't heard from you, but now you're going to show up asking for money again? We have an unbelievable investor base. We have about 90 people in Phunware. And this has been cultivated through every single deal. When I did my very first company, I promised everyone who invested, you get a lifetime call option in me and my partner, Luan. You get the right but not the obligation to invest in anything we do for the rest of our life. If I invest personally, I'll tell you about it. You don't have to invest, but you can look at it. You can say no to everything for the rest of my life. You'll never hurt my feelings. If you want to invest in Phunware, feel free. If you want to invest in this other company, feel free. If you don't, you won't hurt my feelings a bit. Thank you for being generous enough to support me the first time when I had no money. And I would suggest to you that as you start taking money from people, they are your best asset in the world, and they will do anything to help you, unless you're an idiot, unless you ignore them, unless you don't do things that make sense. So good, bad, or indifferent, I send out a Phunware flash report every 3 weeks. Say, here's customer win, a little summary of what's going on, customer wins, a little bit about the product, what's going on with new employees, you name it, religiously, every 3 weeks, without a doubt. And then every quarter that closes, without them asking, I send them the financials. Good, bad, or indifferent. Don't really care. If you're wickedly open, hyper-transparent, I would even tell anyone who's not even a Phunware employee, I could care less. I'll tell them how we're doing it because they still have to know how to execute. They're actually concerned with things like sleep and food. I don't really care. I don't need that. That's the military and the Ranger School did a good job of training us. That's all called priorities of work. Last priority of work is things like sleep. Then you work back from there. Clean weapon, prepare defense, all that good stuff. So I know a lot of people that are exponentially smarter than I will ever dream of being. I haven't met a lot of people that are willing to work as hard as I am to get to the goal. I meet a lot of people that want the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, not a lot of people that want to go through the sacrifice. Trust me, there is a lot of sacrifice. How many of you are either married or serious with a boyfriend or girlfriend? Okay, so it's only a few that are not. Because we're even going to get into the stuff that says if you think you're founding a company and your wife, husband, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend is not on board, you will end in divorce, or you will actually lose your relationship. If you're not there at 5 o'clock for Joey's little play, whatever the hell's going on, and that's a problem, or you miss dinner, you will have a divorce. I guarantee it. And if you have more than, how many of you have more than one co-founder? Only one? Wow, everybody's a solo co-founder. Interesting. So if you have more than one founder, you better make sure not just that person, but their significant other is on board with what's about to happen. Because if they're not, you're going to have a division. Remember I told you 9 out of 10 will fail? These are why they fail. Because nobody really went into it knowing what was about to happen. Then you have ill will, or then you have one person who's trying to placate the spouse. And it's not a matter of placate. Life happens. That's good. But I heard a term here in Austin I never heard in 12 years in California. Anyone want to guess what that term was?
Quality of life.
Work-life balance. You got it. Quality of life. So work-life balance. I'm like, I got a family. That's cool. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I got to go do this. I'm like, well, then don't be an entrepreneur. Grow up. Get real. Stop fooling yourself because you think there's some easy Staples easy button you get to slap it. It is immense sacrifice. Anything I've ever accomplished, the only reason I've done it is because I have an amazing wife. Absolutely amazing. And she shoulders crazy burdens with 4 kids that are now 14, 12, and 11 going through hormonal rages for the girls, and the son who takes the brunt of it because I bail when the cycle syncs up with mom. Because I don't want to be around to deal with those fireworks. So this is actually Phunware's actual performance year over year since we started. So we over here, we had a partial year when we were setting up, a whopping $125,000. Second year, we went up over 4x that, got up to $500,000. Now you've seen 4.5, 8.2. Looks like this year we're going to finish at $23 million. So this is actually some pretty interesting growth, right? This is like big stair steps. You also have to decide who and what you want to be. If you're going to take money from someone, it's because they want it up and to the right, but you can prove it. So when people question our ability to grow, I say stand here and look backwards. Because our run rate right now is at $26 million. Hopefully that means we did $6.5 million last quarter. This year, our sequential growth was $3.9 million in the first quarter, $5.2 million in the second quarter, $6.5 million in the third quarter, and we're trying to get up towards $8 million this quarter. So ideally, this will be more like 23.6. But if we got 7.5, it'd be 23.1. And next year, we're building a plan. Already have it mapped out as a spring-loaded $50 million. And our team knows every single day I look at them and say, and then we're going to go for 100. And if you're not on board for wanting to do that, you're in the wrong place. There's nothing wrong with building a company that you could have 10, 15 employees. Nothing wrong with having a $1 million, $2 million business. That's awesome. I respect everything you guys do as entrepreneurs. And there's no mandate that says you have to, this go big or go home. That's bullshit. If you can have something you're passionate about, you want to build, even if you want to build a lifestyle business that is a good, solid business, does what you want, gives you the time, everybody has to make those decisions. I'm just suggesting if you take $1 from someone, don't do that. If you're unsure, don't take their money because they're giving you $1 because they want 10 back. And they're trusting you to do what you want. So when you look at the cap table, and I'll walk through now who we have, we raised $20 million so far in Phunware without private equity, corporate strategic, or venture capital. That's insane. $20 million without any institutional investment. That's a big deal. So now, over time, as we've done this lifetime call option, we've had more people who've said, God, these guys are so open, they do stuff, they just go work their ass off. They've always treated us really well. What do you think they do? Talk to their friends and their colleagues and other family offices and others. So it starts spiraling. So now at this point, we have 2 billionaires, Mr. McCombs, and we've got a gentleman named Archie Huang out of Hong Kong. Never met them in my life before Phunware. But because of all the goodwill over all the years with all the different people, we keep having people that show up. We have more investment from Central Texas Angel Network, Houston Angel Network, Baylor Angel Network. We have the founder of ComScore. We've got the founder of, or sort of the group that runs Grupo Reforma. We've got folks that actually run cloud strategy for Salesforce. What happens over time is if you do well by people always, and you're always honest, and you're always transparent, and you work your butt off for them, they will fight to the death with you. Because when you go back, at some point, and I've told them, knock on wood, I have not been punched in the face yet with Phunware. Never have I done a company where you don't get punched in the face by something. Back in 2002, it was things like you'd see auction rate securities, the market froze. Suddenly you couldn't access your capital because the market wasn't available. I lived through being on a board where the state of California sent a registered warrant. If you haven't heard of that, that's called an IOU, where the state of California had no money in its budget, sets the terms, when they're going to pay you back. And you're like, really? You're in default and you're going to issue to us when you're going to do what you're going to do. So we call ourselves an experience optimist. The glass is half empty, it's not half full. It's got holes on the side and it's turpentine instead of water. Not because we're really that negative. Your job running a company is to make sure you understand cash flow. Who cares about anything else? How much cash comes in? How much cash goes out? How much money you got in the bank? What's your burn rate? That's the only thing that matters every day of your life. Don't confuse accounting profit with cash. And as we've gotten bigger, as you can imagine, now up in this size, we have like almost $5.5 million of AR. So that little AR that was like $50,000 and now it's $500,000, then it's $2 million. Do you know what it's like to service $5.5 million worth of someone owes you money? And everyone's having battles about payment terms and all this fun stuff of who's going to be the float and the carry. And, oh, we just switched out a clerk, and oops, I'm sorry. We're going to see if can you resend that invoice number back? So you have to get damn good. And on a weekly basis, I would suggest to your finance group, you guys should create a current asset report every single week, religiously. Give me exactly the balance in every bank account right now before I'm going this weekend. So I know exactly what we have, exactly what this looks like, who owes us money, who's past payable, And you have to make that a culture of your company that religiously are hypersensitive about it. Because this also, you see another pattern. We did something that any institution would hate. We're going to start with a service business that scales with headcount, high touch, custom, ugly, yuck. Yeah, none of it. You don't want to touch it. Things in Capital Factory, you guys would say, don't do it. But what we did is we thought it was either arrogant, naive, or foolish to think you could build infrastructure, having never even built a client-side mobile application for a big brand, and make it work at transactional scale around the world. You'd say, how would you even know what the use cases, the feature sets, or the requirements are to support the greatest mobile experiences on earth in infrastructure, and you've never built one. But guess what? Everybody in mobile doing infrastructure, that's all they did. If you've never talked to the Fortune 5000 that runs a P&L, you have no idea what business intelligence they need, what data or insights they need, and you're going to guess what you're going to build for the infrastructure and say this works. That to me was insane. But this is a very hard thing to do, is knowingly start with something like that and purposely change the composition. We're actually, last quarter we did 77% infrastructure revenues. Think of subscriptions and transactions, 23% services. And what we do next year on this 50 million, only 10 million of that will be services. We keep the services there because we want to show off what category defining experiences look like by vertical and how great our infrastructure is. Because some of our customers want to treat us like a big jar of mobile Advil. Just take all the headaches away, please. And we say, great. Otherwise, you can pick and choose which headaches you want. We don't care. But our business model looks a lot like you would think from a utility company. 1-year contract, fixed amount per month that you pay. That might give you up to 100,000 active users on a mobile portfolio, or up to, let's call it 50 million transactions. You know, like feeding an ad would be a transaction. Indexing your loyalty and rewards points would be a transaction. Buying a shirt would be a transaction. And we're going to do about 1 trillion of those this year. So what we do is we set up a fixed amount that you're going to pay for whether you use it or not, just like you would with your water bill. You pay a fixed amount every month for a base amount. And then what do? You pay tier volume pricing discounts on top based on how many gallons you consume. That's our whole business. But the services, we never want it to go away. We just want to keep it at a fixed rate. And the other $40 million for next year, 80%. And hopefully we can get higher than that, but we're building it to say about 80-20 for next year. And that's the way we think about scale and building. So you can have one person in charge of this 10 million, one in charge of that 20 million, another in charge of this 20 million, and find a way to tactically say, how am I going to execute? Not, what's the addressable market? We'll capture, 0.35% of that market. Therefore, look at how big we are. You want to be able to start from the bottom up and say, show me the customers by name. How much money does each one give you? Who are the ones you know about, and how many new ones do you need? That's a much better way to build those direct and indirect kind of channels. So that's the Phunware business model. Next one. Any questions real quick? Because I know I'm spouting off a lot. Yeah?
Are your fixed costs rising as well to cover the services, or is it just the users?
So on the services, the fixed cost to do that same, $10 million or $2.5 million a quarter, that stays pretty fixed. So we've got to make sure to cover that, because that's where you have the creatives and you have client-side engineers and QA, QC, and program management, where they want us to actually build mobile applications.
So as that percentage goes down year after year, your costs to provide that those services.
Well, that $10 million worth, the absolute dollar amount stays the same, but the percent of revenues changes radically. And the other stuff on infrastructure scales immensely. And that's where the high margin stuff is that would be in the 70s. Services, if you're lucky, you can pull out 50% gross margins. Advertising, when we do that, or monetization, probably about the same. But when you get into the infrastructure, it's kind of mid-70s. So our goal is to get to a blended gross margin of between 60 and 70%. This year we'll be in the low 50s, and our margins have accelerated as we've scaled. We actually got to the size where we had to get rid of Amazon AWS. So for those of you building the infrastructure, we saved about $75,000 a month by hitting the crossover point to buy our own infrastructure to put in a data center. And AWS will work when you're doing the early stuff, and then you're going to have to cross over. So if you're depending, we still keep it. So like when we do a NASCAR race, or the NFL draft, or the combine, or an award show, you'll have a big spike, just like today for Monday Night Football. You'll see this big spike, and then it'll just level off. So we'll use AWS if we need a spike or something unexpected. But other than that, you'll have a crossover.
What are the biggest variable costs?
Biggest variable costs get into some of the hosting and the depending on whether you're doing the streaming on behalf or in our business. But most of ours, the good news is on the variable things, our cost of media to support, we have a Tap It by Phunware is like AdMob by Google in terms of a global mobile advertising network. So when we reach out to all those, the cost of media, if we do $1 million of revenue, there's about $500,000 in the cost of media. So the margin's always about 50%. As it scales to $3 million, it'll be 1.5. But that variable will go up and down with the actual revenue, so that's better than fixed on services.
Okay. So it's relative to what you're saying.
Sure. The biggest fixed cost we have is, and I'm always going to say, I'll use this example. There was a company here prior to this facility being here that I guess didn't survive, unfortunately, which I never like to see. But I'll tell you, if you guys are starting out and you're early on and you're in this facility, it's one thing to be here sharing a facility. That's great. If you're setting up, you just got some financing and you're going to set up this nice, beautiful lease, you're stupid. You should never be here. If you came to Phunware right now and you walked into our conference room, you'd see 4 Costco flip-out tables. Not quite as nice as these. We're a little older version, but not dissimilar. Spend your money as if it's the last time you'll ever see. Train everyone in your company to spend every dime like it's the last one you'll ever see. Treat it like it's their own money. I never do anything I wouldn't say. I went to Taipei to raise 1.5 million. Came back with 4.5. You know why? They asked me what my philosophy of spending money is, which was an interesting question because I didn't really have a prepared response to it. But the response I said is, I don't really have a philosophy, but my CFO and I just flew coach to Taipei and we're sharing a room down the street. They gave us $4.5 million because they knew that we didn't waste money. And I never asked our employee base to do anything I wouldn't do. I'll even be honest, I hate employees, just so you know. I've never met an employee I like at all. I love owners. So we give everyone equity. I'm a very Silicon Valley person through and through. I believe everyone should have equity, and wealth comes from equity. And shared sacrifice means everybody can get wealthy, and that's a good thing. And if there's no prouder moment, actually, when you make money, that's interesting. You'll have more fun when you start counting up the number of millionaires you create that came along for the ride, and you can feel great about it. And that's fun. Now, if you ever get big enough for you to go public, the new mantra of going public is interesting. Ideal revenue, $80 to $120 million. Ideal growth rate, 30% year over year. Ideal margins, 60 to 70% blended. And then profitability. Nobody cares. That's even more alarming. We did something crazy. I'm going to take a knee for this. We generated $750,000 of profit the last 90 days. You know, so it's kind of interesting, right? When you think about you can grow responsibly. Every time when we had these curves, we took every gross margin dollar we could, plowed it back into more people, everything that we needed to get as efficient as we could. We always tried to operate, you know, a little bit below cash neutral, or worst case, we tried to keep it neutral if we could, and just plow it back in. You know, when you look at Twitter, right, they went through $150 million in the first 9 months. You can do that as long as everyone wants to support you, and if they turn their back on you, or you know, U.S. defaults on its debt, the credit market freezes, the VCs turn their back, they promised they would never do that because they're tier 1, and then they left them twisting in the wind. So you see a lot of that. You know, Jawbone probably growing. They're trying to do $2/3 of $1 billion of revenue next year, and I think they lose 10 to 15 million a month. So you can do that again as long as you have a big, massive support structure. Otherwise, I would suggest find a balance. The biggest difference between Austin and Silicon Valley is everyone bootstraps too much here. I'm going to encourage you to pay yourself money if you're going to work. I encourage you to actually structure everything you do because it's important to have the real cost in your business to see if it works. And you shouldn't be, it's not a matter of you're not good because you took yourself a salary. When I started Phunware, we started with 0. About 6 months into it, we went to $5,000 a month. And then probably 18 months into it, we got up to maybe $10,000 a month. We've moved it up slowly as we've gone, as the business has grown, as our financial health. Yes?
Is that based on the philosophy of not taking
No, I would still do the same. I mean, from when you start in here to when you start growing, the venture capital money will typically come a little bit later. So we just set up a discipline that says you have to know how much you need to survive on. Because if you don't have the ability to support surviving, and you're not paying each other and thinking you're going to hang on, your founders are going to hang on, it's typically not going to work. The reason 9 out of 10 fail is they don't have any backdrop if it doesn't, and people do stupid things. I also see people that take no money for a year, right? Mm-hmm. Then they raise money and they back pay themselves for a year. And then all of a sudden they're cash constrained and the investors have just put in, said, you just screwed me, I took all my money. And again, that's not what you should do. The money you're raising shouldn't be for the past, it should be for the future. So you have to find a balance. It'll be different for everybody. You know, it's different if your wife's a lawyer and she's making a lot of money or whatever it is, and you're just going to have to deal with it. The reason there's so many great entrepreneurs in their 20s is they don't know what the hell they're doing and what they're going to risk or lose. They have no wife or husband. They don't have kids. They don't have a mortgage around their neck, and they don't really have the same loss of perception. As you get older, you get more conservative. Yeah.
So when did you do your first raise in this chart? Was it from the beginning? Or?
Yeah, I'll start over here. So we showed the revenue. So let me, you go to the next slide. This is just the sort of growth rate. This is the kind of scorecards we do in all hands meetings every single, we do some quarterly, some semi-annual, some yearly. And this is the scorecard I use and say, if I suck, I should fire myself, right? But our team, this is how we judge ourselves. And if I can see that the valuation is going up, right now we just signed a term sheet at $110 million pre to raise up to $30 million. And so hopefully that'll be the first potential group that will actually have some institutional investment, combination of corporate strategic investors and what I'll call the 10%ers on the VCs that aren't such bad folks. They're out there. It's just you got to do a lot of finding to find those. Go to the next slide. This will show you the money raised. So here's the way we raise money. So we're going to be 5 years old in February. So 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13. Think of this as series A, B, C, D, E. So not necessarily the classic structure of the way you think about what an A is priced at and the way a B is priced in size. We did it more as a sequence of numbers. And the first one here, this was the equivalent of 3.5 million pre-money, 5 million post on 1.5 million. We actually raised 1.63. So some of the amounts are timing of what showed up in a partial year and the full year. So that's why it won't match up exactly, but that's more when the money came in. So that was the first round of Series A in 2009. 2010, we opened an 8.5 million pre-money valuation. We were going to do $4 million, so 12.5 post. We raised 1.73, and we had the opportunity to buy the assets of another company that had raised 40 million of venture and sort of blew up. So we froze the Series B, and that meant we were at about a little over 10 million as a post money. We thought it was fair to let the people that were already in get the other valuation. When we were buying the asset, we raised $6 million. That was now 2011. 14 million pre, 20 million post on $6 million. So you notice a common theme. It's kind of 30% bites in some respects as you're going. There's no right or wrong. You could have 25 to 35 is kind of normal along the way. The other thing we then did is we opened up, so then we're at 20 post. Then we raised, in 2002, we opened up to a $10 million round. We stopped at actually 8.2. There was 100,000 of that was in an earlier year. But we stopped at 8.2, so that was 45 million pre, 53.2 million post. And we stopped at 8.2 because we had the opportunity to buy a company called Tapit that we were going to build our advertising monetization off of. It was kind of a combination of all of our assets, all of theirs, to put it under one roof. And so we stopped on the 8.2, and fundamentally, we then issued stock. We did a 1/3 cash, 2/3 stock deal to buy them for $23 million. So we issued equity at 60 million pre, 75.5 million post, to then go along with about 7 million of cash. So the cash that Phunware actually used We spent of the 6 we raised about 5.5 for the first asset. Then we used $7 million of cash out of the 8.2. So what you're really realizing is we almost took virtually no money, and we were using the gross margin dollars from business, of winning business, to plow it back in. And then we would use the money to accelerate things as we went. And so ultimately right now, this year we opened a $5 million bridge into up to, really it's a $20 to $30 million raise that we're going to do. And we opened a $5 million bridge, which I always set up for our angels. Because if you're going to do an institutional raise, the angels typically get left out. But I'm an angel, and I don't like that because they're the reason we got where we are. So I carved out 5 of the 30 and said, this is for me and this is for them and anyone else I want to plug in. And then the other 25 will be tied to, the people that are the corporations or the other investors. I would also suggest, I always do series A, B, C, D, preferred stock. I never do common stock raises. And I would suggest that you strongly consider never using common stock raises. And the reason for that is that anyone that you put in that are friends, family, and angels that are in common stock instruments and get crammed at the expense of the preferred, all you're doing is guaranteeing to burn bridges with all the people that you most want to support you in the early stages of every business you ever get. And so what I do is, and even on my side, I made one investment in my life in common stock, and I'll never do it again. And the reason why is because people like to sometimes play games and do reverse splits and treat classes of stock differently, and it's just completely inappropriate from my perspective. So that's a methodology of what I do as a commitment to them, and would suggest that you guys think of that as well. And so assuming we raise the full 30, we'll be somewhere between 37 and 57 million overall that we've raised. And right now we're probably in the low 20s of that's already done, counting the bridge, and the prior money was already at about 22 million or so is where that's at. Questions? Yeah.
So what about like that first year, 2009, tough time, right? You mentioned that even you having the background of a successful serial entrepreneur, it was still a tough sell. What about your pitch? What about, the message you were delivering convince folks to be able to?
Sure. Well, so one thing too is, it's not that we couldn't have taken venture money along the way. It's at what cost or price, which is where you get legislating the details. So this is where you got to get really fluent on liquidation rights and pari passu versus participating or partially participating preferred. And I've always been, I'm a vanilla kind of guy. There's a pre-money and a post-money, and stop legislating the downside. I might say 1x liquidation right in reverse order. And outside of that, if you have a problem with beyond that, go away. So part of it is when VCs are trying to figure out how they can take multiple bites of an apple, and I've done it long enough to just say, this is not heads I lose, tails I lose, or heads you win, tails you win. I said, we're the ones that are going to bust our ass to make this work. And I don't mind legislative protection on the downside. That's reasonable to me. But on the upside, I'm not going to get punished for success. Why should you punish me for being successful to make you money? Because you're not the one doing the work. Our team's going to do all the work. So you never, much like you've seen some saying that said, never force a loyal person to not give a damn anymore, or never encourage. You never want to set up a capitalization structure that makes the management team say, this is equally good if we fail or if we do a home run. So let's make reckless decisions and swing for the fences, because if it doesn't work out, they're all going to lose. And that's just a perverse, it's okay if you have a broken bat signal to right field, so to speak, using a baseball analogy. Not everyone's going to get to, and arguably the growth of Facebook and some of these, this isn't because everyone's magically brilliant. They have a lot of good stuff that sets up a base, and then the thing explodes because of a lot of macro stuff. It's not like Dell was brilliant from 1990 to 2000, and then everyone got a lobotomy at Dell, Cisco, Microsoft, and suddenly everyone got stupid. You confuse no internet access with everyone had it, nobody had a PC to everyone had it, to nobody had broadband to everyone had it, no one had a cell phone, everyone had it. There's a difference of maturity that goes on, and there's cycles for that maturity. And it gets harder with the law of big numbers as you go up. Make sense? The pitch that you asked about, one thing you're never going to fake, as you could probably tell from me, because I'm a little animated and I don't get to speak at home, You can't fake passion. If you're full of crap, everyone will see through it. If you're sitting up here and you don't believe in what you're saying, trust me, I'm not the only one that can figure that out. A lot of people can. But it's a combination of passion, energy, do as you say, do always what you say you're going to do. Stupid things like, honor, ethics, integrity, you have no idea how unusual it is. I can assure you, bless you. If you actually go out and you take money from people and you communicate with them every 2 to 3 weeks and you include them in the stuff that's going on, they will try to help you find customers. Or the more they know about your business, there's maybe a customer, a partner, an investor. Something will surface that you wouldn't have known about. And also, they're going to respect you exponentially more because they're part of the team. So I talk about the Phunware family with the PH. Now I got people who send us messages back. That's fantastic with a PH and phenomenal with a PH. And it's almost gotten funny, but we watch accountants do it. We watch our lawyers do it. We watch our investors do it. We watch people talk about it all the time. And that's the biggest thing is you should end up with about 12 to 15 slides of your pitch, and that should be your whole business plan. If you ask me how many business plans I've written, I don't know if I have. You should be able to get your whole business into one piece of paper or a front and a back if you need a little bit more verbose. I'm kind of loquacious, so I can do that too. But it should be about 15 slides of PowerPoint. You should have thought of every imaginable thing. And it always looks the same, right? You have your agenda and who's the team and what's the problem you're trying to solve and how big of a problem is it, the market sizing, what's your magic solution, how do you solve it, who uses it, what's your business model, and then what do your projected financials look like, what's the investment opportunity, and comps. There it is, done. That's the sequence every single time. You probably tell them this often. Okay, next.
Not me.
Question for you. What are you raising money for? You mentioned for acquisitions. And
World domination, yes. So actually a bigger balance sheet. So one is that the working capital needs of the business, when we're talking about just the float and the carry, you want to have more flexibility in what you can do with the float or carry. Hey, when you come in, can I ask you for a beer?
Sure.
Thank you. You said I was sneaking out and I was going, now I got to get a beer. A lot of that is just to have flexibility. So remember when I said we assume everything that can go wrong will go wrong? It's always better to take the extra money if you can take it when you don't need it. Always raise money when you don't need it. Absolutely. You never want to raise money because you have to have money. That is Pulp Fiction stunt double kind of stuff. If you've ever seen that movie, it's not good. So I would say we want to do more money for organic growth. So we want to invest. If we raise $30 million, there's probably $10 million of that is all business development, market development, sales development to set up offices in places like, so we're in Austin right now, San Diego, Southern California, and a very small office in Maryland. I want to actually add San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Miami as wave one, mostly sales, business development, market development offices. Ultimately, we want to add Seattle, Denver, Dallas, Atlanta, Boston. And that gives us our grid for the U.S. Everything south of the border we'll support out of Miami. And then another $10 million goes into all infrastructure engineering to build the platform and expand it by vertical. And then the other 10 is both the balance sheet flexibility and salting M&A. I want to enter Europe by buying a company in the UK, and I want to enter Asia by doing the same. And that way, in the 3 types of selling we do, 2 are direct, 1's indirect, I want to be able to have a footprint where the Fortune 5,000 customers are, where the people that controls the $60 billion of advertising is at, and then where all of our channel partners like Cisco and AT&T and others are, so that we can support them where they already have a footprint instead of having to jump on planes and fly everywhere. So that's it. It's really to be opportunistic. I lost out on 2 M&A deals where Phunware would already be 60 to 70 million in size right now because we didn't have the balance sheet strength. And we lost one of them out to the Deason family that sold ACS to Xerox. So like Forbes number 398.
My former employers.
Your former employers. And we lost out to another one to a private equity firm in Asia because they already had the cash and we had to raise it. And both of them were sweetheart, great deals, and we just couldn't do it. And I was so angry that we lost out. Thank you.
Oktoberfest or Pale Ale?
Pale Ale's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't mix and match too much. You said moonshine, you had me there. So a lot of that is, as you get bigger, you want to have more flexibility and strength, just because you don't know what you don't know. And I wouldn't profess to know, does the U.S. go through this Russian roulette of legislative shutdowns again? Does it dominoes go? Did the Chinese decide, screw this, they don't need a nuclear weapon, they're just going to sell all of our debt? That would cause a big enough problem without a nuclear war. Just start unloading bonds like crazy. Watch interest rates spike to the moon. There's a lot of ways that sort of mutually self-assured destruction exists already. So you want to have that for all the things that could go wrong. And that's why we try to be, it's a lot easier for us to run our business now with a slight profit than it is to be $5-10 million a month underwater and then go, uh-oh. I don't want to have any uh-ohs. Okay, next one. So this thing, by the way, is a whole slide deck that I'm going to ask if you can distribute to all of you so you have it. So I'm not going to try to read all these, but I wanted to hit highlights of things because, as we were saying, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's important. If you want to maximize your ability to raise money from people, make sure you pick a Delaware C corporation, period, end of story, if you're going to take money from anyone. And if you don't say Delaware, please say Nevada, and then stop and never say anything else. Without you knowing about it, the only thing I care about when I look at a deal is how's it structured, how's it financed, how's it monetized. You'll notice I didn't ask you what is your product or service. What is your addressable market? I just don't care. Structure is most important. If you say, we have an S-Corp, I don't want to invest in you. Why? Because an S-Corp's designed fundamentally as a structural level to never make money. While interesting to distribute if you have a couple friends doing something, that's fine. But if you're taking other people's money, disaster. They want you to show a profit at some point. They don't want you to purposely not show it because you're distributing it every year. LLCs, those are good for funds. Those are good LPs for things like accountancies and partnerships. But LLC is like what you and your wife or you and your husband should have as a personal piggy bank that you invest out of and do other cool things. LLCs are not for corporations. And the reason why is that when I'm going to invest, and others like me, nobody wants to flow through the losses. We don't want the losses on our income tax. We want to start a long-term capital gains clock and get to 12 months so that we get long-term capital gains because we're betting you're going to be successful, not that you're going to fail, and you're passing through the losses. That's really not what we care about. Ideally, we want to start a clock because we want to get to 5 years, like my investment in Ring Central, so that I get super long-term capital gains, and I left California, and now I'm in Texas, and I don't have to pay the state tax. That's like a 4-point swing in all the good direction. So you want to make sure you pick, because you're getting strike one if you say the wrong words. The reason you pick Delaware is it's the most favorable for directors, officers, and liability. And you also want to use the veil of a corporation with Delaware because if something goes wrong, you don't want to have to get slammed in the face and obliterated for the rest of your life because you picked something else. No one wants a membership interest, which is what you get in an LLC. When it's how do you finance it, that's back to these discussions. The bootstrap, the idea of angel, institutional, corporate strategic. You don't have to do everything at once. You just have to be thinking about how to do it. I'm encouraging you the biggest difference between here and Silicon Valley is as follows. In Austin, classical thing, bootstrap Austin, we are going to bootstrap. And we're going to win Austin, to win Central Texas, to win the Midwest, to get the United States. And by God, then we're going to go get the world. Silicon Valley, you don't think that way. You actually go to somewhere like Macaroni Grill and you say, Bob or Susie, please don't write in crayon. We're using this paper. You're writing your business plan, and you want to figure out how to create a new market that never existed before. You're going to dominate 2/3 of the global market for it. And when you win 2/3 of the world, you'll get the United States, which gives you the Midwest, which gives you Texas, which gives you Central Texas, and oh yeah, Austin is here, so you're good to go. That is the fundamental difference of how you see people build in Silicon Valley versus Austin, Texas. Just flat out my observation. Koala should have been more well-known than Foursquare. Even though Foursquare has struggled like crazy, they should have never had Foursquare known better than them. But they tried to bootstrap it so damn much that the other team that decided to take a lot more money a lot faster suddenly got a lot bigger, got onto the little TechCrunch and GigaOM and all the other nice things, VentureBeat, and the rest is history. So you have to understand that even if you think your idea is unique, there's probably 3 to 5 people minimally somewhere that already have it. And there are probably at least a couple of them that are already doing it. Whether you know about it or not is a secondary story, but it's very rare to truly do something that no one's thinking of. There might be people who had the idea and didn't have the backing to do it. That's fair. Might be someone in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand that's not going to have the same access that you will. But that's the real difference between the two approaches. And then how the monetization goes, fundamentally, no one cares about profit in tech, but you don't want to be irresponsible. They care about growth. People are buying growth if they're going to invest. And you have to understand that your metrics, it's clear that we've seen Snapchat, Pinterest, and Path. I think it's absolutely insane to watch. Snapchat just raising money now at $3.6 billion. After June, they were at $800 million, which was already obscene from 6 months before at like $60 million. So God help you on that, right? I'd love to see the liquidation preferences built into that deal at that value if it goes wrong. I'm sure that everyone other than the people that put money at that valuation are going to be the ones getting crammed. Maybe it'll be fantastic, but that's almost a disservice for you to have no revenue and have that much traffic if you have no idea. Like Twitter's IPO, their S1 proves they have no idea how to monetize. None. They're just completely lost on their business model. Maybe they'll figure it out. Facebook, when it went public, for as bad as the IPO was, their financials were exponentially better than what Twitter looked like. They're just got a little ahead of themselves on the valuation. So, all right. This thing I talk about, product company and all that, just the same thing. Understand who you are, what you want to be when you start. Have a big vision up front for what you're trying to accomplish. Even though we had to do crawl, walk, run, and steps, the idea that we're going to arm humanity to engage, manage, and monetize every device on the planet, you can't figure that vision out 2 years from now. You've got to have a very big vision of what you want to get to if you want to be a big company, even if that's a really ballsy, big idea when you start. Even think of Facebook. It's easy to look back and say, oh my God, 1.1 billion. It started out in colleges, right? It was a very small thing. The evolution of a communications platform came later. It's okay to reinvent certain things, but you can't completely reinvent the past of what you meant to be. Some of this stuff is a little bit accidental and lucky, as much as no one wants to believe it. All right, there's a question. Yeah.
So you can start off as a product company and evolve into a service company as you. Why would you do that? As the volume of the product grows to a certain critical mass.
Well, we did the opposite. We started with services to learn what we had to build on the platform to then launch the product and then invert it. If you start with all product, usually over time you'll have at least some percentage of services to offset, maybe it's the support or the maintenance or some other things that go with it. But even like Bazaar Voice, they'll have non-recurring expenses that they're doing to set up the sites that they're then going to have ratings, reviews, testimonial stories. So there's usually some element of it. It just depends what you're trying to be. The more you're trying to do SaaS, the less services you should have. The more you're doing platform, the less services you should have. But there's always some element of it. Ironically, Dell and HP are doing the opposite, right? They're layering on a ton of software, a ton of services, because they're worried about the commoditization of the hardware.
I'm going to give you a time check.
Sure.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, no problem. So skip through this one. Okay. And then the rest of the ones I put in here on lessons learned, I'm going to hit a few. And I'm going to highlight that at the back of this, I gave you a huge pile of references. There's like 4 or 5 slides worth of the accountants, the lawyers. So the only lawyer you should care about in your life is called Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati out of Palo Alto, California. There is one here in Austin, but I always use the word in Palo Alto because they border Stanford and they're at the heart of the Valley ecosystem. Best performing fund of 1999, WS Investments. So the other thing is they'll write you an engagement in plain English. They'll say, well, we won't charge you anything. Go out, do your best, and if you hit a certain amount of financing, then you have to pay our bills. Often they will invest out of the WS investment partnership. The individual partners will invest. And so you might get 50 to 100,000. They're smart. They know they're going to get it back through the fees. And if it doesn't work out and it goes away, they'll say no harm, no foul. Thanks for trying to be an entrepreneur. Why? Because they put the first 50 to 100,000 in YouTube and Yahoo and Google and Cisco and Oracle and Apple and Atari and everyone else you know in the Valley. And so I say, look, quack, walk, eat, do something like a duck. I will hire either PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte & Touche, or Ernst & Young, because I'm anti-KPMG right now. But one of those three will be our auditors. Why? Because I don't want to start with a cheaper, inexpensive firm, and then no one will honor the 2 years of working papers, and you're going to have to redo them and repay for them all anyway. Because if you're going to be a duck and you're going to be trying to go on an IPO, you want to already have the best one there. And you'll be surprised you can negotiate with those guys a startup rate. Say, hey, I'm small. I know I can't afford you, but I want to be in your program. I want you to represent me, and I want to have 3 years of more reasonable fees, and then I'll graduate up as I grow into what I can afford that you pay for. And that way, then when they say, oh, who's your auditors? PricewaterhouseCoopers. There will be no more questions, right? Okay, that's done. Who's your lawyers? Wilson Sonsini, you go to Rich Rosati. All right, next item. That's literally how it will work. And then when they're doing your corporate documents, we do our own contracts, but everything for patents, trademarks, if you ever have litigation or patent trolls, or some, all these things that you do, including financing and corporate stuff, they will keep you out of a problem. They will make sure your cap table's right. I will tell you, in every company I've ever founded, our founding team has never even owned 50% of the company even once, as a starting point. Combined, all of us, never once. So you have to decide, do I want a smaller piece of a really big pie, which I call good dilution, or do you want to have this really big thing that's worth nothing? So when you set up, every company I've ever set up, typically you'll see founders might be from 35, 45% of the cap table. You'll see that we'll leave 25, 35% for employee stock options. And then maybe 20, 30% would be the first Series A round. And that's the cap table, fully diluted from day one. Because the other thing you do is if you raise money but you act like you don't have to issue options, unless you're Hercules and you can do everything, or Thor, I guess we're supposed to use now instead of Hercules, you have to understand you're going to need great people to make a great business. So you want to allocate money aside for directors, advisors, all your employees. And the more you have them acting like owners, you'll be shocked what they'll accomplish versus someone trying to punch the ticket and check off. Next slide. So people matter immensely. The perspective we've talked about, if you go to the next one actually, because I've hit a few of those already. And we'll send these out to you guys so that you can go through. This one is a big one I want to hit, the top. Because everyone is stupid in general when you have the opportunity to figure out how to make progress. You and I can all sit here and we can put any one of you up or myself, and you can all figure out every reason to not invest in me, or I can figure out how to not invest in you. It's easy. I can tear you to shreds on anything that you're trying to do. I've had a lot of practice at doing it. People can do it to me because there's certain things they can challenge me on that I can't prove or disprove. We have to go forward and look backwards. What I would say is try to negotiate deals with people so you can put them in a position where you're able to be the one who says yes. Because 99% of the world wants every reason to not accomplish anything, maintain the status quo, not do the deal. Try to embrace the way to say yes, to get something done. And if you do that, you'll find very different. The other thing that's different here versus there, everyone here wants to be in stealth, or it's a very secret thing. God, please, it's like people arguing over the tallest midget, or winning a beauty contest in a leper colony. It's like, whatever great analogy you like, that's what it is. Be co-optive when you're young. Until you're $1 billion in market cap, you should be open with everyone you compete with. Hell, I don't mind. I'll go to CK, Mutual Mobile, who are these people doing whatever? I don't care. I'll sit down with them, tell them anything they want to know. It's not going to help them suddenly do what we do. But if I can help them, they can help me. You'll find in the Valley, people will work together co-optively a lot more. And then when they really get big, then they'll start worrying about it. After all, Google wouldn't be here if Yahoo hadn't put a big pile of money in. Ultimately, Yahoo made a lot of money out of that. But, Google became Google, and Yahoo's now, thank God they got Alibaba. All right, next one. Now, references. I just want, if you can go down, skip over the want to work at Phunware part and the are you sure? Those are kind of backup. The references there, from here on, this is everything that I would suggest you can think about across anything you're trying to accomplish. my preference and everything I've done 100% of my life is with Wilson Sonsini. They've been fabulous. I couldn't even dream of doing anything without them. They are fantastic. DLA Piper, I've seen people do stuff. I wouldn't say anything bad about DLA Piper, but those are the only two I put there for a reason. I couldn't even imagine another law firm other than these two. On the accounting, I talked about all the rest of this stuff. If you can just keep going down, so you'll see from crowdsourced venture capitalists, so you know who some of the big players are. You'll see multiple chunks of that. All the angel networks from all over the country, if you're trying to find where you can raise money, because they're very active. And you guys are blessed with having CTAN here. It's the most active on the number of deals and the total amount of money. It's fantastic. And so I included all those just so you guys could have them. Happy to hang around for a while, answer questions. If you guys got to bail, that's fine too. But I appreciate your time to kind of share some of the interesting stuff we've gone through. And hopefully this time next year, maybe we'll file an S1 and life will be fun. Fun is actually our ticker symbol. That's what we want to shoot for. PHUN.
So thank you.